Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including Google's support of Kamala Harris in the ad sphere, how some Senate candidates may not actually be panning out well for the Republicans, and how the Democrats may be making some ground, and then, of course, talking about the incident on Sunday, the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. This is the second one in 2 months, so of course we are going to cover it and we're going to talk about it more. And, of course, we will end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. That's enough rambling from me. Let's jump into our daily debate. So, if I told you that Google was actually helping out one candidate in the election, who do you think it would be? I'm going to be honest. If you say anything but Kamala Harris, I think you don't genuinely understand how the search engines and these companies work. But then again, I think some people could make an argument that they're promoting Donald Trump stuff a little bit too much, and maybe you could come to a rationalization that way. Though I think if you truly have an understanding of how these companies work, especially Google, and the fact that she's from California and she has many, many connections in Silicon Valley, as do a lot of Trump's backers now too, so don't get me twisted. I think you would be remiss to believe anything but the fact that Kamala Harris is actually being supported here. But if you disagree, throw it down in the comments section. That was a bit of a weighted question. Maybe you just cut it off at the first 30 seconds, answer that question, and then listen to the rest of it. With that said, let's jump into our first article. This one comes from KTRH.iHeart.com, and the headline reads, Google admits to manipulating search ads to favor Harris ahead of vote. And then it goes on to list the specific station. This station is based out of Houston and Texas, or Texas and specifically Houston. So when we first learned about different manipulations for one candidate or another, like I said, I don't think we were necessarily surprised. And you may be thinking, Alex, what do you mean by manipulations? Whether it be the Facebook taking down the Hunter Biden, or Twitter taking down the Hunter Biden laptop story, whether it be certain terms that are used on the more right side of the aisle being suppressed, or even the OK symbol being something that was labeled as a hate sign because Donald Trump would do it at his rallies. And then there was a few instances of maybe one or two people that were flagged for it specifically. I remember when it came out, and obviously one or two out of a population of north of 320 million or so. That's still nothing. I understand. But when you hear these sort of stories that one side seems to be getting suppressed more than the other, you definitely take a step back. And then you hear other stories about pro-Gaza protesters also being suppressed, some of their chats and some of their content also being labeled as hateful, which I think you can make an argument for all of them. That doesn't necessarily mean that they should be pulled down. But when you hear a story like this goes beyond just flagging certain types of information, pulling off of social media. This pertains to the largest search engine in the entire world. But even if you don't want to go to the entire world, it's the largest search engine within the United States. It is the standard search engine in Safari, which is used by Apple users. Not everybody on Apple uses it. I personally use Chrome and Brave, and some people use Chrome on their own. Some people use Brave. Some people use Opera. But at the end of the day, the default setting on a lot of the different computers we get is actually, or devices we get, is actually going to be Chrome, which means a lot of internet traffic is being filtered through there. So when you hear stories like this, that ads are more likely to be placed in these different searches that are pro Kamala Harris, you have to take a step back and, one, ask the question, why? Two, ask the question, is that okay? The why question makes some sense if you believe that people inside Google lean more Democratic. I mean, you can look at the data of where the money that was donated from Google employees went. Then again, it's also possible that the people on the right within Google didn't necessarily donate money, so that could be statistics that aren't 100% reporting every single political leaning of people within Google, but you can definitely tell that the most politically active people within Google are definitely putting money into the left side of the aisle. So that explains the why does this happen. And the second question, is this a good thing? I think there is no good argument here. And when I say think, I am 90%, 99% certain there is no good argument here why one candidate should get preferential placement on their ads versus somebody else. I'll tell you now, when Kamala Harris did her large ad buy, and let's be clear, I'm not saying that her ad buy was illegitimate. I'll tell you now, every single video, when she first got into the election, almost every single video that I would watch on YouTube had a Kamala Harris ad at one point. Or it was an Obama that came on and said the fundraising deadline is going to end here soon, please apply. Now, Trump obviously has started to buy ad spaces as well. I have definitely seen advertisements for him. The number of Kamala to Trump ads still is heavily outweighed in the Kamala section. That could be explained by funding alone, and I do believe she still has spent more on the YouTube side of things. But when it comes to searches, that's different than just YouTube ads for people that are going through videos. This is just quote-unquote organic placement in front of anybody who's searching practically anything. So let's go into some of the actual quotes from the article so we can discuss what's going on here. Quote, a little bit more. Quote, in an undercover video, OMG, or O'Keefe Media Group, caught up with a Google growth strategist who said and admitted that Google has been manipulating its search engine to favor Harris ahead of the election. Dakota Lazier, the Google Ads salesman, said, quote, you go to Google, they're reorienting the search engine such that Kamala's more, favored, end quote. So, what happens when you search Trump? Maybe you get some Kamala ads. What happens when you search Kamala? You probably get some Kamala ads. What happens when you search very specific policy proposals? Now, do I know this is exactly how it's working? I know there's anecdotal evidence that even when people are searching for Trump, they're getting Kamala ads, and they're trying to persuade that sort of audience that may be learning a little bit more. So I know that's anecdotal. That is not statistical evidence, of course, and we would have to have a blank browser and go in without any previous search history, because that's obviously going to affect things. But you would have to go in and get that sort of statistical information. But on an anecdotal level, we have seen examples of this before. And the question then becomes from here, when they say they're trying to make her favored, when they say that they're trying to help out Kamala or make her quote unquote, favored, does that mean that they are only putting up positive coverage of her on the searches? Or is it really just the fact that they're covering the entire page with more Kamala ads? Those are actually both very good questions, because if one is downright sleazy, another one is absolutely manipulative and has to be stopped immediately. One of them is, okay, we're just going to make sure that all the ads that are populated here are Kamala, versus the other one saying we're actually going to actively filter bad coverage and news about Kamala out of the first page. And honestly, if they did this to both candidates and they said, okay, we're going to get rid of the bad news for Kamala, we're going to get rid of the bad news for Trump, while I'm sure there are plenty of people who are Trump supporters who would say, yeah, that's a good thing. We need to get rid of all the bad news, make sure that everybody has the best information in order to make an educated guess. I would say, no, you have to make sure that the bad information is in there 100%. I don't care if it's for Kamala, if it's for RFK, if Obama jumped back in there, it would have to be for Obama, it would have to be for Biden, it would have to be for Kamala. You have to allow the most popular, because it's the whole point of an algorithm that puts forward the most viewed / popular sites. You need to put forward the bad information as well, because at the end of the day, if Trump says something super crazy outlandish that's going to turn off the Midwestern voter, and then the Midwestern voter comes in and votes Trump and then learns about it afterwards because they hadn't seen it because it was being suppressed, you are actively taking away information that is crucial to the operation of our democracy. The reason, I think there's a great example here where we can pull back. If you have been in business, you understand, or not even just been in business, but even taken a basic economics class. What is one of the main things that economists point to that creates a market failure? It is imperfect information, whether that is people having the inside track on different companies going live or the different deals that they're going to do so people can actually use the stock market in order to inside trade and make their own money, but also what is something that companies can take advantage of in order to continue selling their bad products. It's not providing bad information to the customer. They're being lied to. They do not have perfect information. No one has perfect information, and that can create a market failure. Just like we like to say that our democracy and our republic actually is semi-emblematic of the market structure that we have in this country, and how we're supposed to have basically this open market where people can come out and make their case and plead with the American people and say they're going to represent them and make it into the position of, quote unquote, the CEO of the United States. If there is imperfect information, you run into the exact same thing. You run into a market failure. So the job of Google, if anything, should be to put all the information out there, good, bad, and ugly. Now, you will probably hear arguments from people at Google, which is, well, we have to moderate the bad information. If it's false stories about Kamala Harris and it's sensational, of course it's going to get lots of coverage, and we got to make sure that those don't get out there. And that is fair enough. I understand the perspective, but I have principles that would say that is idiotic because, like I said before, bad information has to get out there, but also the bad information has to be able to get out and be disproven within the marketplace in order for that to actually matter. Because if it is simply disproven or said to be false and then suppressed, you are going to push people who may have some inkling that it's false to believe that it is even more true and that there is an operation of elitist control trying to prevent you from hearing the true information, which will only make them more zealous and more passionate about the problem. And that is not the way to deal with political discontent. You address it in the open. I understand that's hard. I understand people do not want to take these things on head first, but that's how you have to do it, especially in our system. And I say that's how it should be done. That is an ideal world, and that is the best way to do it in order so that people trust you. But if they can get away with slyly manipulating things like this article is accusing, then maybe they're like, oh, we don't have to deal with the repercussions of people finding out, or we don't have to deal with the repercussions of it necessarily being a bad idea to take down this information. We're just going to do it on the sly. They're never going to see it in the first place, so then it means that they can't believe that it's a giant conspiracy to suppress it because they're not going to see it at all. And I think that's my little bit of conspiratorial side coming out a little bit more, but I think that when you look at our generation and you ask them, do you trust the government? Do you trust the media? Do you trust XYZ, XYZ, XYZ? We grew up in a time when we were literally told, hey, go Google something. Make sure you look up the information. You have all the wealth at your fingertips. And then within 5 years of that, we were told, oh, by the way, don't trust everything that you see on the internet. We grew up in a time when all the information was there, and everybody, for the most part, seemed to be, and I say for the most part, there are obviously thousands upon thousands of people taking advantage. But a lot of the people building up the internet were actually doing it in good faith. There were places like Wikipedia. There were different articles that were going out there. Everybody's trying to disseminate information in order to reach that point where we have perfect information within the marketplace because you're empowering people. Information, knowledge is power. And I hate using just that tried and true trope, but it is accurate. You can bring down an entire company if you understand that their complete business model is a sham, that the products that they say are healthy for you actually have these certain chemicals. And you may have been able to suppress that in the past because it doesn't make it out because of NDAs and things like that. It doesn't come out in the lawsuit because you settle. But the internet provides a easy mechanism to disseminate that information in order to empower the customer. And when you have situations where we're actually limiting the amount of information people can have and not allowing this battle to be fought out in the internet, it causes cynicism, especially when you have a generation like ours that grew up on this beautiful resource being corrupted in live time. And I think that is something that really needs to be addressed by people that are on the internet now, because you're losing a generation. You are actively losing faith in the generation that actually made you possible. Because this generation, like I said, we are, I don't want to say we're obsessed, but we are hyperactive users of the internet to gather information, to collect information, to find sources, to actually go out and make sure that we know how to operate within this world and can operate with the correct amount of knowledge. And yet, when we read something that we don't like, we look for another source because we are actively aware that information can be false on there, and we look for our own claims and then the evidence for it on this internet. And that is allowed and abated by a system that says it's trying to work in our best interest and provide knowledge, and yet we are also fully aware that false information can be put out there and sometimes is intentionally done. And when that happens, when falsified information gets out there, when falsified processes, when things are manipulated in order to help one person or another, that just continues that narrative. Because if there's not genuine sentiment behind these ads for Kamala Harris, there's not actual support there, and therefore they shouldn't be ranked as highly in some of these searches, then you are playing a false game where you are acting as if people actually care about what she has to say, and they are actively getting behind her. And the mob mentality, or the mass the mass following mentality of, oh, this person is popular, I need to get on this bandwagon, is an actual thing. And that's obviously what these developers at Google are trying to take advantage of. They're trying to shed the best light on her so that she has the best chance of winning. Then again, once again, this is my deeply cynical side. I've never been the biggest truster of Google in general. Then again, I still use their products because they are very good at what they do. There's no doubt about that. But when it comes to this sort of thing on their search algorithm, I try to go to other platforms for it. All the other tools, the G Suite is very nice. Love me some YouTube. But their algorithm specifically on their search, I try to avoid it as much as I can. And this is why. Because it is actively being changed. And whether or not there's more follow-up on this, and we learn that it goes even deeper than simply the algorithms for their ad sales, and it goes to like what I was describing at the very beginning, which is suppressing negative information about her, we need to watch out for this sort of thing, and it needs to be more widely reported. Because I've heard absolutely nobody, I repeat, absolutely nobody talk about this article as of yet. Then again, it was posted this morning, and I read it this morning, so maybe that is why. All right, so let's jump to our next article, Cole, that comes from Salome. Key Republicans' shrinking leads could give Democrats new path to Senate majority. And if you're reading this as a Republican who believed for a long time, there's lots of talk about the fact that the Senate's basically locked in this time, that Sheehy was a great candidate, that Justice in West Virginia had a really strong chance of actually overturning things. You are shaking in your boots if this is true, because at the end of the day, the Senate was going to be the one thing stopping even if Donald Trump lost, it was going to be the one thing stopping the Democrats from having the triumvirate. It was going to stop them from having the House, the Senate, and the White House. And as Kamala Harris has come in and the race has gotten even closer, people are worried about Trump. The House is already on the slimmest of margins, and honestly, they have made the Republicans look like laughingstocks throughout the course of this whole debacle between the previous Speaker McCarthy and Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and even Mike Johnson flipping on some of the key Republican issues and going a little bit more neocon. He has most definitely made or not him alone, but these decisions and these practices and the way they represent themselves on TV and the way they get reported, they have made themselves look like clowns, and that has probably soured a lot of people to the House. But they, in theory, could still have a lot of faith in their Senate candidates, and that is where the Republicans were basically saying, oh, this is our last ditch. It's pretty safe at this point. Like, we think we're going to win the Senate, so we're going to prevent the triumvirate. Then again, there are lots of other candidates out there. Everybody on the right, they haven't gotten lackadaisical. They haven't stopped. They understand that this is still something important. But you hear a report like this, and you start to go, whoa, 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 whoa. Slow your roll here, buddy. So let's actually dive into some of the quotes from the article. Quote, with Democrats defending Senate seats in swing states, including Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada, Democratic Senator Jon Tester's race to keep his seat in Montana appears to be the most likely pickup for Republicans' Senate's effort this year. So they go on to describe Tester, saying when he was elected in 2006, how he actually got reelected in 2012 and 2018. He has a long time record actually being a person that the moderates in Montana actually like. Quote, now, however, he's trailing the Republican opponent Tim Sheehy in most polls. The importance of this race is reflected in the ad spending in the state, with Axios reporting that Democrats are spending upwards of $150 per vote on ads in Montana, with Republicans spending nearly $130 per voter in the state. That's extremely high. If you don't know, I say extremely high. That's pretty darn high, which means they both understand how important this race is going to be to their electoral prospects. And when you hear this next part, because the Montana race hasn't necessarily been locked up for Sheehy, but Republicans have been saying we have a good candidate there, it's probably more than likely going to go well for him. When you hear this next one, where it was never really talked about besides the fact that it was happening and that they were saying, oh, well, it's probably not going to go the way of the Democrat, you might be a little bit surprised. Quote, in Texas, Democratic Rep. Colin Allred trails Republican Senator Ted Cruz by just 4 points, 43 to 47, according to a recent state Texas Public Opinion Research Survey. Other recent surveys have found similar results, with a Morning Consult poll finding Cruz ahead by 5 points, and an Emerson College and the Hill survey finding Cruz leading by 4 points. So that is no bueno. At the end of the day, Ted Cruz, he is known. Then again, a lot of people, and I've talked to some Democrats who are like, yeah, he's just a ripe word I'm not going to say on this podcast. He is a ripe blank, that we do not like him. He is terrible. We want to get him out. Even though they don't live in Texas, they're still saying they want to make sure that he is gone. So while he is a known name, that does come with some drawbacks, because if he's known and a clip gets out there that people don't necessarily like, that can hurt him. But also he has the name recognition. So being this close means that it's probably not a good thing, especially as we go into November, as polls in general, on the presidential level, they definitely tend to shrink and everybody kind of consolidates back to the middle. In Senate races, I don't know the polling history as well. Then again, I know the trends overall in polls are, as we get closer to the election, normally the leads shrink, but that doesn't always happen. But when you hear this, you're thinking, I don't know. That doesn't sound good for our boys in Texas, especially our Republican boys. What about the next one? Quote, Florida is the other state where Democratic challenger Rep. Debbie Marshall Powell is hoping to unseat a Republican incumbent, Senator Rick Scott. In the race, Emerson College and the Hill polling found Powell trailing Scott by just 1 point earlier this month. And remember, the reason that both of these examples are important is Florida, which has slowly turned a little bit more red. Then again, there's always a likelihood to be a swing back. But remember, the Democratic Party basically has been in rebuild mode ever since 2022. They got eviscerated on the state level. The red wave, if it happened anywhere, it literally came in and flooded Florida real quick. You don't need a hurricane to take over that state, apparently. You literally just need the Democratic Party to completely collapse underneath your feet, and you get your electoral wave. And Texas, which has been a little bit back and forth, you've had more people coming in from Democratic states, turning certain cities like Austin specifically a lot more blue, but for the most part, it is still seen as a pretty red state. So when you hear both of these candidates going through a little bit of harder time, the polling's not necessarily looking the best for them, you have to always reconsider your priors. You have to take a step back and say, okay, what is going on here? Is this a concerted trend that is going to ripple across the nation? That overall, with Kamala Harris doing better, people on the Democratic side of the aisle are more willing to get out there and vote. They have a little bit more optimism. They're actually going to go out and vote for her, and then that means that they're going to vote down ballot for more Democrats. Does it mean that it's specific to these states alone? I know for a fact there are multiple survey outlets going around and seeing if these trends will translate to the national scale. And they do lean Republican because this is something that they are genuinely worried about, and they should be. Because, as I mentioned before, if your belief is that the Democratic Party will win the Senate, the House, and the presidency, and that will be terrible for this nation, you are definitely clinging to the hope that you can at least win one, and the House seems the furthest from likely. The Republican candidate versus the Democratic candidate on the presidential side, I'm going to be honest, right now it's basically just drawn because you have Kamala Harris, who is blank candidate, apply whatever I want, and you have Trump candidate who is fully defined, his support's locked in. I think right now you're drawing a pretty even straight on that one. The Senate, like I said, is the only one where there is a true chance right now. Obviously, everything can change, where there's a true chance to draw divides and really make sure that they are locked in before we get to the voting, until people get to the polls in November. So Republicans are grabbing the edge of the table right now, and they're like, whoa, nope, okay, battle mode, let's get in there. I mean, you even see people like Ben Shapiro going out, and he loves to talk about it, how he's active in this election. He's going out and campaigning with senators. So people on the right obviously are, I don't want to say worried, they're thinking about it more, and it is at the front of their mind as we're coming into November. All right, so let's go to the actual presidential nominee for the Republican side. Let's talk about Mr. Donald J. Trump. This article comes from the Daily Beast. AK-47 gunman with scope got in range of Trump as he golfed. So the reason I didn't actually do a breaking story for this on Wednesday is because things were still coming out. We didn't have as many details. There wasn't live video of everything like there was in Butler. But also because I wanted the story to develop a little bit more, and I had already recorded something to come out on Monday. So this is the little bit of work that you're going to get on it. I'm not trying to memory hole anything. This is not okay. Political violence is unacceptable. I will say all the normal things that people say. I will say all the platitudes. This should not be something that's happening in our election. But I want to take a step back and talk about how much is being covered. So I don't necessarily watch mainstream news as much as some people in my life do. I'll tell you now, there are certain people around me who watch it quite a bit. There is one person in particular that I reside with, and they watch it a ton, and they bring up certain points, and I say, I really wish I could provide you with an alternative, but I don't think you're going to take the time to learn the systems in order to go out there and listen to a different perspective rather than the mainstream. But the mainstream seems to have not necessarily memory hold it, but they have moved on very quickly from just the incident itself to the history of the shooter. And even then, they're not necessarily talking about it as much as new media is. So why? Why do we not talk about this? Probably because Donald Trump is okay, so the story isn't as tantalizing as the person himself. And some of the leanings, the most passionate leaning of this person, Ukraine, it falls in line with basically the mainstream media, the mainstream party politicians within Washington. So yeah, you probably don't want to promote somebody that is one of the most zealous advocates of one of the policy positions that you hold, even if you don't hold to the degree that they do, aka setting up an entire website, which may have actually been a front. We don't necessarily know yet, whether it be going on multiple journalist outlets in order to profess the message, whether it be asking if we can get people to go to Ukraine, apparently working out of Ukraine and Kiev at certain points. So yeah, there's a reason they don't want to cover it, and it may be because it's an example of one person buying a specific narrative so much that they have gone so far down the rabbit hole that they can't even take the blinders off anymore. It's not actually, I take that back. They've gone so far down the rabbit hole that their blinders got knocked off 30 minutes ago, and yet they can only see down the narrow path because that's how tight it is and that's how dark it has become. So of course, they don't want to necessarily go into it. But let's go into some of the extra details. I'm sure you've heard it by now, but they were saying that he was roughly within 500 yards. The gun had a scope on it, meaning that he very well could have still hit Trump. The Secret Service agent was about a hole in front of him, actually noticed him. He ran away. A bystander was able to witness him jump into a car. The local police actually arrested him later on as he was going into a different county, and then they flew the witness up in order to identify him. That's basically all the details that this article actually went into, though there is a little bit more. Quote, Bradshaw estimated that Trump had gone within 300 to 500 feet of the would-be assassin with a rifle and a scope. That's like nothing but a long distance. An investigation led by the FBI remains ongoing. In a brief statement issued several hours earlier, the Trump campaign communications director, Stephen Chung, said that Trump is safe following gunshots in his vicinity. He did not offer any further details. And we need to, and I've said we need to a lot, but when I say we need to, I'm not just talking about me. We as a population, anybody listening here, take the breath, the largest of breaths. If you're a Democrat who doesn't necessarily like Trump, but you hate seeing political violence and this worries you, take a breath. If you're a Republican who loves Donald Trump and doesn't want to see him hurt, take a breath. Because incidents like this, if not handled correctly, by handled correctly, I don't mean by like the media, I don't mean by the people talking about it, even though they do play a role, but by the people hearing the information, everybody take a breath, okay? This is not the end of the world. If this election does not go your way, the American Republic does not end this year, okay? Whether it's Trump, whether it's Kamala. If the Democrats get the triumvirate, it's not the end of America. If Trump gets back into office, it is not the end of America. Anyone that sells you that crud is lying to you. They are trying to take advantage of the molecules that are produced in your brain when you are afraid, when you have a fear response. Do not let them win. Do not let their outcome be the outcome of, how should I say it? Don't let their wanted outcome be the outcome, which is you continue to click, you continue to check on, you continue to believe the fact that this could be the end. No, you are smarter than that. We are smarter than that. At the end of the day, we are all people who live underneath the greatest flag on earth. And even if you don't agree with that, we have the most freedoms which allow you to disagree with that. But even if you think America is absolutely awful, at least you have the freedom to do it, and at least, there are people actively trying to protect your rights on a daily basis. And you may not agree with the politicians, but there are people out there fighting and representing America all across the world, the fighters who have sacrificed their lives for the values of this country, and they are fighting for us to continue to be free and to continue to battle this out and continually improve. So it is not the end of the world after this election. Everybody take a breath. I feel like we always need to say it. I said it last time after something like this happened. It is not the end of the world. Your life will go on. And if your life doesn't go on, maybe you are too invested in some of these things. So with all that said, let's jump into our daily delight. We're trying to leave on a positive note. And I feel like saying, hey, it's not going to end, the world's not going to end is a positive note. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to resonate with everybody. So let's go to our article from Parade Pets. The headline reads, Dobermans experience bubble wrap for the first time, and the result is cute chaos. And honestly, the way that the author describes these guys trying to defend their owner and bite at the bubble wrap because of the noises it makes are absolutely amazing. It really shows the loyalty of dogs and the keen awareness of, oh, that sounds like something that could be dangerous. Let me protect my person. While it could be annoying sometimes when they really get loud and yappy, it also shows a lot of love, and we absolutely love it. So if you want to check out this article or you want to read any of today's articles, the links will be in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. And also, if you want to check out 6 and 6, which is the international/global news stories that I do on Tuesday and Thursday, they come out in the same RSS feed, the same YouTube channel. It's 6 minutes, no more, and you get 6 stories, one from basically every continent except Antarctica. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.